Hey guys, tonight we journey far, up into the stony highlands of medieval Ethiopia, where the air is thin, the silence is sacred, and the food, well, let's just say it's more about soul than spice. Picture it now, you trudge up a sun-hammered path, dusty and uneven, your sandals long since abandoned to thorns. The monastery looms ahead like a stubborn mirage, stone walls leaning into the horizon, crosses carved deep into basalt, and prayer chants humming from some invisible source. You're tired. You're hungry. You're also pretty sure this place doesn't believe in room service. And just a heads up, you probably won't survive this week without craving bread shaped like a sponge and a suspiciously tangy stew. But that's fine, because this isn't about indulgence. This is about quiet mouths, quiet minds, and a daily menu unchanged for centuries. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it in your part of the world? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You don't knock. That's not how it works here. You simply arrive, hoping someone hears your presence, or maybe senses it. The monastery has stood for generations, nestled among the green plateaus and broken cliff faces of Tigray or Lalibela or somewhere the maps only halfway believe. You glance up. The carved windows are dark. The gates are open, but only just. You step through, into a quiet courtyard that smells faintly of wood smoke and fermented grain. Welcome. Your stomach rumbles. Nobody reacts. A bent figure glides across the stones, robes brushing the dust. He nods at you, then disappears behind a heavy curtain. No words. Only that silent acknowledgement. You are here. You are hungry. But first, you must wait. In these monasteries, food is not a rite, it is a rhythm. Monks follow fasting calendars that most modern nutritionists would call mildly alarming. Wednesdays and Fridays? No animal products. Lent? Forget dairy, eggs, even oil. Just legumes and shadowy greens that somehow taste like the color gray. But not yet. Before you earn a spoonful of shiro or a torn hunk of injera, you have to enter the silence. Historians still argue whether this silence was absolute or elastic, whether monks truly never spoke, or whether there were loopholes for kitchen emergencies, like Brother Elias dropped the stew in the well again. But as you sit on the cold bench outside the dining cell, you feel the hush wrap around you like a damp woolen blanket. Even the birds seem muted. Even your thoughts slow down. Time drips. A bell chimes once. Somewhere in the back of the compound, someone coughs, a low, apologetic sound, like a sinner trying not to offend God's breakfast. Then a door creaks. A monk motions you in. You follow him through a narrow passage lined with hand-woven baskets, empty clay jugs, and the smell of something both sour and earthy. Maybe lentils. Maybe regret. The refectory is small, low-roofed, and strangely warm. Firelight dances on stone. You take your seat at a long wooden bench, the grain worn smooth by centuries of elbows and silent chewing. Before you, a woven tray, mezab, sits ready. Injera already waits, curled like a culinary scroll. The monk to your right is chewing with monastic intensity. The one to your left is praying with his eyes. No one looks at you. This is the beginning of a deeply slow adventure. Your belly will be filled, eventually, but not quickly and never loudly. You'll eat what they eat. You'll sit how they sit. You'll endure the silences, the heat, the sour bite of fermented flatbread. And if you're lucky, you might learn to find comfort in the quiet simplicity of it all. Unless, of course, you snore during prayers. The bell hasn't rung yet, but already the kitchen is alive. Not with noise, never with noise, but with movement, steam, and the hush of practiced coordination. You're not in the kitchen, of course. Outsiders aren't exactly welcome in that holy chaos. But from your place just outside the narrow doorway, you can see flickers of it through the arch, shadows darting past clay ovens, a burst of fire under a soot-dark pot, and the rhythmic rustle of woven grain sacks being unfurled like ancient scrolls. You're supposed to be helping prepare the morning meal, but help is a generous word. Mostly, you stand and observe, careful not to knock over the water jug again. That was yesterday. Brother Germa still hasn't looked you in the eye. Your job this morning is simple: wash the teff. This impossibly small grain, smaller than a flea and 3 times as slippery, is the backbone of nearly everything eaten here. It's also annoyingly stubborn, clumping to the sides of the bowl as you swirl it with slow circles, like a medieval DJ who took a vow of culinary patience. As the water darkens with dirt and chaff, you pour it off carefully. One monk stands behind you, silently correcting your every movement with only the tilt of an eyebrow. You consider whispering sorry. But then remember. Silence. Breakfast won't be extravagant. Not here. It rarely is. Today it's likely to be plain injera, folded in thirds like old parchment and left to steam beside last night's hearth embers. Maybe a thin bean porridge, depending on what the garden has decided to bless or withhold. You watch as another monk, older, places dried leaves in a clay pot. You ask with your eyes. He answers with his hands, wild rue, boiled to ward off morning chills and bad dreams. You breathe in deeply. It smells like bitterness and pine needles and maybe tea that's given up on being liked. Historians still debate whether morning meals were always this austere or if certain orders allowed fruit or milk on non-fasting days. But one thing they agree on, everything had to be earned. Work preceded sustenance. Prayer preceded pleasure. And pleasure, to be honest, wasn't really on the menu. The sun begins to climb, casting long beams through the tiny eastern window. A rooster crows, not the loud, braggy kind from fairy tales, but a sad, groggy wheeze, as if it too regrets waking up. One monk grins faintly. You pretend not to notice. Humor here is rare but not forbidden. You remind yourself to cherish the small joys. A perfectly unbroken injera round, a bean with extra skin, a breath of warmth from the fire that finds your cold ankle. Now the preparations shift. A large mezab is brought into the room, its lid woven tight with reds and blues that have faded like forgotten hymns. Inside? Nothing yet. But soon it will hold the food meant for 7 or 8 brothers, served communally, without division or complaint. The tray is lowered onto a low wooden platform, its legs carved with what might be lions or might just be enthusiastic goats. You can't tell, and no one's explaining. You watch as the injera is unrolled with reverence, laid out to cover the base of the mezab like edible parchment. A single ladle of bean stew is poured onto the center. No garnish. No spice swirl. Just brown, slightly lumpy comfort in a quiet heap. The smell is earthy and vaguely nutty, like lentils that once dreamed of being exciting but chose humility instead. As the bell finally rings, a soft chime, no louder than a silver spoon on ceramic, the monks begin to file in. You step aside, head bowed, as Brother Hiley brushes past with a nod. He carries the wooden spoon that will begin the serving, though every monk eats with hands, right hand only, scooping stew and tearing bread in motions as old as the monastery itself. You take your place again, lower this time, closer to the wall, where the air is cool and you're less likely to offend someone's elbow. You wait. You do not speak. You do not ask. You watch the steam rise from the center of the tray, curling upward like incense. You breathe slower. Your stomach growls, but you pretend it didn't. In this stillness, in this soft chaos of meal preparation, you begin to notice the rhythm that's been here all along, the scrape of spoon on clay, the crackle of fire, the wet slap of rinsed injera hitting the tray. It's a quiet symphony. And you're just beginning to hear it. You've never heard silence quite like this. Not the awkward, someone said something weird kind of silence. Not the libraries don't sneeze or die silence. This one is full, not empty. It hums. It has a presence. You sit on the low bench, your back to a wall that's probably older than your entire country, and you realize the monks aren't just refraining from speech. They've made an art of it. The rule of silence isn't universal across all Ethiopian monastic orders, but in this particular stone enclave, it's as strict as the fasts. You eat in silence. You chew in silence. You even sneeze as quietly as possible, which, as you just learned, is not easy. There's a reason they don't hand out pepper. The meal has begun. One by one, monks dip into the central mezab, right hand only, tearing off bits of injera, scooping up the modest stew. No one reaches for more than they need. No one rushes. It's not just a meal, it's a meditation. The act of eating has been elevated to something like a sacrament. You chew slowly, more aware of each taste, each texture. Your jaw does most of the talking now. Still, the silence isn't oppressive. It's not monastic punishment. It's discipline, yes, but also devotion. It gives space for presence, for attention, for you to notice how the injera, sour from 3 days of fermentation, has that spongy give beneath your fingers. How the shiro has hints of garlic and just enough heat to make your tongue curious but not panic. You taste the meal more completely because you're not filling the air with words. Historians still argue whether monks developed this meal silence independently or borrowed it from older desert traditions, perhaps from Coptic communities to the north or Syriac ones even farther afield. But regardless of origin, its effect is profound. You're not just full, you're grounded. Across the table, Brother Makonnen accidentally drops a piece of injera. It flops to the stone floor like a lazy fish. He pauses, folds his hands in quiet regret, then picks it up and sets it aside. No grimaces, no sighs. Just one of those monkish shrugs that say, "The Lord gives and the Lord takes away, and sometimes he takes your bread." You're not allowed to speak, but the body has its language. A raised eyebrow here. A subtle hand gesture there. Even the way someone blinks can say, "Pass the salt," or "I can't believe we're still out of goat butter." It's like watching a very slow, very reverent mime performance. With legumes, the silence is occasionally broken, but only by necessity. A soft bell might signal the end of the meal. A cough might slip out from a brother deep in contemplation and dust. Once, faintly, you hear the scrape of sandals as someone heads to the water jugs for a refill. But no one talks. Not even the old monk who, rumor says, used to be a prince. He hasn't spoken a word in 15 years, and you're a little afraid that if he does, the stones themselves might answer. You find your mind wandering. Not in a chaotic way, more like a leaf drifting on water. You remember your arrival. The steep climb. The mule that looked at you like it knew all your secrets. You think of home. Of your last loud meal, maybe with friends and laughing and a television blaring in the background. Here, there's only the rhythmic motion of hands, the warm weight of the stone bowl, the cool breath of the wind coming through the slits in the wall. A fringe belief you overheard yesterday, murmured by a young monk during laundry duty, was that the silence also keeps food from spoiling. The fewer words spoken near a stew, the longer it lasts. You're 99% sure that's not scientifically sound, but it's a charming thought. Maybe holy hush does keep the lentils from going funky. As the final bites are taken, no one leaps up. No dishes clatter. Instead, the tray is gently covered again, lifted with both hands by two monks, and carried off without ceremony. A moment later, a basin of water is brought for washing. You rinse your fingers, drying them on a linen so coarse it could exfoliate sins. Then the monks rise, one by one, silently, and file out. Back to the fields, the scriptoria, the beekeeping hives, the goat pens. You remain seated a little longer, letting the silence ring in your ears like a soft bell you don't want to stop hearing. No one says thank you. Here, gratitude is implied. You're fed. You're full. You're quiet. You're not even properly hungry yet when the next fast begins. That's the thing about life here. Just when you think you've earned a full meal, the calendar steps in and says, "Nice try." In the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, fasting isn't just for Lent. It's built into the bones of the week. Wednesdays and Fridays are routine fast days, echoing ancient betrayals and crucifixions. Add in the multi-week seasonal fasts, Lent, Advent, the fast of the Apostles, the fast of the Assumption, and you start to wonder if eating is the exception, not the rule. And don't forget the fast before communion, or the fact that some monks fast voluntarily, or that the definition of fasting here means cutting out all animal products. Yes, all of them. No meat, no dairy, no eggs, no butter. No complaining either. Just a quiet embrace of legumes and the occasional oil drizzle like it's liquid gold. Today is a fasting day, and you already know what that means. Lentils again. Or chickpeas. Maybe both if the kitchen's feeling extravagant. You watch as a young monk, his robes still more dust than fabric, stirs a pot with a stick that may have once been a tree. The stew smells like garlic, ginger, and discipline. There's no bread today. Or if there is, it's leftover and stiff around the edges. Injera without animal fat cooks up drier, tougher, more reluctant to fold. You tear it anyway, scoop anyway, chew anyway. Historians still argue whether these strict fasting rules emerged purely from religious intent or also served practical functions, like stretching scarce resources through seasons when gardens sulked and goats refused to cooperate. Some suggest these rhythms reflect pre-Christian traditions of seasonal restraint, woven into the newer theological fabric like unseen threads. But whatever its origins, the impact is real. You feel it. Slower mornings. Lighter bodies. sharpen senses. After 2 or 3 days without butter or honey or even the mild creaminess of goat milk, your tongue recalibrates. A spoonful of lentil stew tastes brighter, richer. Your belly, once greedy, becomes grateful. You sit on a low rock near the garden, staring at a patch of kale so determined and gnarly it looks like it could win a fistfight. This is one of the garden's champions, vegetables that thrive under neglect, sun, and monkish silence. You don't tend them. That's not your duty. But you watch, and you marvel, because these plants are your chefs now. Someone brings you a bowl. A ladle of shiro stew again, yes, you're sensing a theme, with a small heap of something green and unidentifiable on the side. Wild mustard? Dandelion leaves? You taste it. It's like chewing a sock someone dropped in a citrus grove. It's also not the worst thing you've had this week. Meal silence continues. You've grown used to it now. You don't even notice it until a bird chirps and you jump. It's like someone threw a cymbal across the courtyard. But then you relax, chew, and try to identify the flavor dancing around the edges of the stew. Is that fenugreek? Possibly. Or someone's hope, boiled down into paste. The fast doesn't make you angry anymore. Not like on your second day, when you tried to sneak a handful of roasted barley nuts and accidentally set off a moral crisis involving 3 monks and a very judgmental chicken. Now, you begin to understand that fasting isn't about denial. It's about tuning in, honing awareness, making room. You remember the words of Brother Johannes, whispered during a walk along the olive grove path. An empty stomach listens better. You laughed at the time. Now you're not so sure he was joking. You sit longer than you need to. The bowl is empty, but you keep holding it, letting your fingers trace the worn rim, smoothed by years of hands like yours, tired, reverent, always halfway hungry. A breeze cuts through the garden wall and flutters the hem of your robe. It smells like basil and dust and the sweet musk of sun-warmed stone. Someone passes you with a nod. The day moves on. So do you. But not quickly. Your steps are slower. Your thoughts gentler. You're not quite full, but you're also not craving. Just drifting along the rhythm of the monastery, fasting in a way that feels less like going without and more like finding something else entirely. Maybe that's the point. Or maybe you're just too lightheaded to argue. It's back again. The flat, familiar, ever slightly sour thing that arrives with the reliability of sunrise and mild disappointment. Injera. You've eaten it every day, sometimes twice. Sometimes 3 times if the monastery is feeling generous or if a saint's feast day got wildly out of hand. At first, it was novel. Then odd. Then annoying. Now, you just accept it, like aging, or sandals that never quite fit. Today, a fresh round is unrolled onto the mezab. You can tell it's a good batch by how it holds its shape. No rips, no thin spots, just a mottled, spongy disc that smells of fermentation and yesterday's firewood. It's made from teff, that impossibly tiny grain you once tried to wash and ended up accidentally flinging into your own eyes. Teff is everything here. A crop so small and so hardy it's been grown in these highlands since the days when kings wore lions like fashion accessories. And injera is the way teff sings. You tear off a corner, your fingers already used to the feel of it, soft, damp, slightly elastic. It clings a little to your fingertips, like it's not quite ready to be eaten. But you eat it anyway, folding it over a scoop of stew, rolling it into a makeshift spoon, watching it soak up the lentils like a holy sponge on a mission. Injera's taste is layered. There's the tang, of course, from its slow fermentation. Historians still argue whether ancient Ethiopian fermentation was intentional or just an inevitable byproduct of doing everything slowly. But that tang sits on top of something deeper, earthier, a flavor like rain hitting old stone. You don't just chew it. You absorb it. The monks never tire of it. Or if they do, they don't say so. You suspect it's less about enjoying injera and more about respecting it. Food is function. Food is faith. Food that doesn't show off. Of course, there's variety, sort of. On feast days, the injera might be thicker, or layered with spice-infused oil. Once, someone added crushed lentil powder to the batter and whispered that it was a secret recipe passed down from a hermit who lived in a cave and cooked with lightning. You're not convinced, but the injera did have a nice crunch. There are also darker injeras, made with red teff or barley, and lighter ones, made with wheat during times of teff shortage. You once bit into one that was definitely not teff at all and tasted faintly like hay. Still, you ate it. Monks never use forks, of course. The injera is both plate and utensil. You eat from the mezab communally, careful to pull only from your quadrant. You learn that lesson after reaching too far once and accidentally breaching Brother Tedessa's zone. He didn't say anything, but he blinked very slowly and did not pass you the stew after that. Quirky tidbit, some monasteries have rituals for the first tear. Whoever breaks the injera circle must do so with intention, no sloppy rips, no hesitation. The break is a symbol of unity, oddly enough. Like saying, yes, we will all share in this modest, spongy will of nourishment and not complain about it, much. As you chew, you reflect on the sheer persistence of this bread. It has survived empires, invasions, droughts, and entire theological disputes. Somewhere out there, empires have risen and fallen, but this fermented disc just keeps showing up. Sometimes crisped around the edges. Sometimes steamed soft and pale. Always here. Always humble. Always ready. You glance around. A few monks are finishing. One gently pats the center of the mezab with the last scrap of injera, soaking up the final drops of stew. The bowl is nearly clean. No one speaks. No one claps or compliments the cook. That's not how things work here. You don't praise food. You practice it. Your own last bite is slightly sourer than the rest. Maybe it sat in the air too long. Maybe the teff was moody. You don't mind. By now, you're used to its moods. Outside, the wind picks up, carrying the scent of burning eucalyptus leaves from the outer courtyard. You stretch your legs. The meal is over. The injera has done its job. And later, when you're hungry again, it will be there. Again. Just like the silence. And you'll tear it. Again. Just like a prayer. Shiro again. You're not surprised. It's the stew that never leaves, the one that anchors every silent meal with its humble consistency and suspiciously lava-like temperature. Made from ground chickpeas, garlic, onions, and whatever spice Brother Azarias decided was just enough, Shiro was both a comfort and a challenge. Comfort in its creamy texture, challenge in the fact that you can't tell whether it's bubbling or just aggressively existing. Today, it arrives steaming, its ochre surface shimmering slightly like the surface of a holy puddle. You watch as a ladle drops it into the center of the injera. It spreads out slowly, thick as custard, defying gravity and probably a few dietary laws. You resist the urge to poke it. It doesn't like to be rushed. The monks eat shiro with a devotion that borders on mystic. And maybe it is. This paste of pulverized legumes has fed generations. When the rains failed, shiro was there. When the goats ran away, shiro. When fasting forbade everything delicious and vaguely creamy, guess what slid in under the radar? That's right, shiro, with its plant-based righteousness and garlic swagger. You scoop some onto your own piece of injera. It clings tightly, reluctant to let go of its central warmth. The taste is surprisingly bold. Garlicky, peppery, with a sly afterburn that creeps across your tongue like a delayed theological realization. You chew. You wait. The heat builds. You blink. A single tear might form, but you refuse to let it fall. Historians still argue whether shiro began as a poor man's meal or a spiritual one. Was it necessity that birthed this humble stew? Or an intentional act of culinary asceticism? Either way, it has transcended its origins. It's no longer just food. It's a presence. A character in the monastery's daily drama. A quiet, smoldering reminder that simplicity doesn't mean bland. Once, you heard a monk say, not out loud, of course, but in a note smuggled into the laundry, that there are at least 12 types of shiro. Spicy, smoky, thick, thin, chunky with onions, or sleek like porridge. Some monasteries add berbera, others black cumin. One remote brotherhood is rumored to add crushed lentil chips for texture, though no one has dared verify it. Today's batch has something extra. You can't quite name it. Maybe roasted shallots. Maybe divine intervention. It lingers on your tongue in a way that feels personal. You glance around to see if anyone else noticed. They haven't. Or if they have, they're too spiritually mature to react. You consider making a silent thumbs up, but wisely choose not to. The texture, as always, is both friend and foe. It warms your belly. It sticks to your fingers. It somehow ends up in your sleeve even though you're sure you were being careful. And when you wipe your hand on the cloth, it leaves a golden smear that looks vaguely like Ethiopia's highland map, if that map were made of legumes and slightly burnt onions. Despite the monotony, Shiro never tastes quite the same. That's part of its charm, or its punishment. The weather changes it. The cook's mood changes it. Once, the entire batch was left too long on the fire, and the resulting char flavor sparked a brief debate over whether God intended this stew to have such a smoky afterlife. You finish your portion slowly. Shiro isn't meant to be rushed. Not just because it burns your mouth, though that's part of it, but because eating it quickly feels disrespectful, like fast-forwarding through a prayer. So you pace yourself. Fold. Scoop. Chew. Contemplate. Outside, the wind has stilled. The monastery feels wrapped in its own breath, the walls holding warmth from the kitchen fire. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tolls, not a meal bell, just a reminder that time still exists, even here, where nothing ever changes and somehow everything does. As the mezab is lifted and carried away, you realize you're full. Not in the bloated, post-feast sort of way, but in that warm, slow glow that says, I have eaten. I will not complain. You rinse your fingers again, dry them on the stiff cloth, and rise. Shiro will return. It always does. It's part of the monastery's rhythm now. Just like you. You didn't expect alcohol here. You really didn't. The place feels about as indulgent as a sack of rocks and a vow of quiet discomfort. But then came Tej, honey wine, and with it, a confusing moment of delight, doubt, and vague existential crisis over whether monks are secretly having more fun than you. Tej isn't an everyday thing. It appears rarely, quietly, like a guest who knows not to knock too loudly. You first saw it on a saint's feast day. A large clay flask appeared in the refectory, wrapped in coarse linen, carried by two monks with suspiciously satisfied expressions. They said nothing, of course. But they didn't have to. You could smell it, the fermented sweetness, the faint tang of wild yeast, the promise of something warmer than tea. A small gourd was passed your way. You held it like a sacred artifact, which, depending on the saint in question, it just might have been. The liquid inside was golden and slightly cloudy. It shimmered faintly in the light, like sunshine mixed with old secrets. You sniffed it. It smelled like honey, lemons, and danger. Tej is made from honey, water, and a curious herb called gesho, a bittering agent native to Ethiopia, functionally similar to hops, but with a personality more reminiscent of an aging herbalist with opinions. The monks say the best gesho comes from plants that have grown in graveyard soil. You're not sure if that's reverence or superstition, but either way, it tastes slightly haunted. You took your first sip with caution. It was sweet at first, warm, syrupy, deceptively gentle, then came the bite. The gesho doesn't shout, it whispers, sharply. Like a librarian with a vendetta. You coughed, quietly. The monk across from you blinked 3 times. You took that as solidarity. Historians still argue whether medieval Ethiopian monasteries regularly brewed tej or only reserved it for rare religious celebrations. Some accounts claim certain abbots discouraged it, fearing the slippery slope between spiritual warmth and tipsy chant rehearsals. Others insist it was a sacred element of festal worship, used sparingly, reverently, and never in excess. The monks you're with fall somewhere in between. No one is getting drunk here. That would be noticeable. But you do notice how the mood softens, just slightly. Shoulders ease. Eyes brighten. The silence remains, but it no longer feels heavy. It's more like the kind of quiet that follows a well-told story. A collective stillness, held not by discipline, but by peace. You sip again. The gourd is passed. Another monk takes his share, swirls it with expertise that suggests this isn't his first saint's day. The youngest monk, who usually peels vegetables with a look of pre-martyrdom, smiles faintly after his sip. It's his first tej. You suspect it won't be his last. The meal that follows is special. There's still injera, still shiro, but today there's also duba, roasted pumpkin with garlic and oil. And lentil fritters. Yes, fritters. Fried. Crunchy. Possibly contraband. You bite into one and nearly see God, or at least a minor saint. You don't talk. No one does. But the tej speaks on your behalf. It flows through the meal like a second language, loosening knots, softening edges. Even the shiro seems to have more enthusiasm tonight, like it, too, is celebrating. Later, as the sun sinks behind the stone walls and the air turns blue with evening, you sit quietly in the outer courtyard, the faint warmth of tej still glowing somewhere between your ribs and your sternum. A candle flickers nearby. Moths spiral around it like pilgrims of light. You listen to the wind and wonder how many other feasts like this have unfolded here. How many silent toasts have been raised in honor of saints whose names now echo only through these walls. Quirky fact: some monks believe that honey harvested closest to the church roof contains the holiest sugars. You look up, eyeing the bees hovering near the bell tower, and wonder if that's why the tej tasted faintly of incense and thunder. You lean back against the stone, hands resting on your belly, and breathe deep. The monastery returns to its usual hush. The gourd is empty now. The feast is over. But the sweetness lingers. And for the first time, you think, maybe silence doesn't mean absence. Maybe it just means everything that matters is already being said. You wake early to the sound of nothing. Not birdsong. Not bells. Just the soft shuffle of sandals on stone and a faint breeze nudging the wooden shutters. It's garden day, or at least, that's what the hand-carved sign near the cloister bench suggested when it appeared last night, hung by Brother Tesfaye, who communicates mostly through eyebrow tilts and dramatic sighs. Out behind the eastern wall, beyond the row of laundry lines and silent beehives, the monastery's garden unfurls like a secret, lush, tangled, humble. No rows. No symmetry. Just chaos organized by instinct and years of trial-and-error monastic improvisation. You follow a narrow dirt path that curves past thorny fig trees and low-slung herbs, down to a small stone hut that smells faintly of onion and wet goat. You spot Brother Tekla kneeling in the dirt, tugging at something green with the determination of a man who has declared war on tubers. You approach. He gestures to a woven basket. Inside, leafy greens so ragged and obscure they look like they were gathered during a windstorm or by goats with taste. He hands you a bundle. You sniff it. Bitter. Sharp. Maybe even medicinal. These are wild edibles, the untamed cousins of cultivated crops. In times of scarcity, they're essential. Even in times of relative abundance, they're honored. Historians still argue whether medieval Ethiopian monks deliberately cultivated these hardy greens or simply learned, over generations, which weeds didn't kill them. Either way, the knowledge is passed down not with books, but gestures. You watch as Brother Tekla sniffs, crushes, tastes. You try to imitate. You fail. The leaf you just sampled tastes like grass soaked in vinegar. He nods approvingly. Back in the kitchen, the greens are rinsed in rainwater and tossed into a wide, shallow pan. A handful of garlic. A thumb of ginger. A whisper of salt, if available. Oil? Not today, it's a fasting week. But you notice a sly monk set aside a bowl of roasted flax seeds, possibly to grind into paste and sneak in some richness. Culinary rebellion, monk edition. The dish that emerges is not glamorous. It's green. Slightly slimy. Smells like a field after rain. But it's oddly satisfying. The texture is somewhere between sautéed spinach and philosophical resignation. It goes perfectly with injera, which as always, waits nearby like a patient friend. As you eat, you glance around the room. No one makes a sound, of course. But you swear the monk across from you chews with more enthusiasm today. Maybe he recognizes one of the greens, maybe it's a favorite from his childhood. Or maybe it just reminds him of a time when food grew freely, untamed, and unplanned. A quirky aside, some of these greens are known to be mildly medicinal. One, called gomenzer, is said to soothe indigestion, mend ulcers, and possibly ward off negative dreams. Another, a hairy little leaf with a sharp aftertaste, is whispered to improve memory. You eat 2 extra bites. Just in case. The meal ends as quietly as it began. The greens are gone. The injera has been respectfully dismantled. The mezab is cleared, wiped, and stored. You rinse your fingers in silence, pat your hands dry on your tunic, and step outside. The garden awaits again. Its crooked beds and wild patches speak not of abundance, but of resourcefulness. These monks don't grow for luxury. They grow for survival, for sustenance, for balance. The greens that grow here thrive in poor soil, under blazing sun, with little water and no pampering. You find that strangely comforting. Before you leave, you crouch beside a clump of something leafy and dark. You crush it gently between your fingers. It smells like dirt and pepper and patience. You nod, as if to say, I get it now. And you do. At least a little. The sky has been moody all day. One of those indecisive highland afternoons, bright, then brooding, then bright again, like nature's trying to make a decision but forgot how. You stand at the edge of the garden, staring out toward the low ridge beyond the olive trees, where the real trouble brews. Gray clouds hang there, dense and unmoving. The air smells like rain and wet stone. Inside the monastery walls, the kitchen hums quietly. There's tension in the air. Not the dramatic kind. Just an awareness. Because when the garden disobeys, meals get interesting, and not always in the good way. Today, it's the turnips. They were supposed to be ready. Everyone thought they were ready. Brother Dawood even offered a silent fist pump yesterday after checking the roots. But now, half of them are soft, bitter, or oddly shaped like disappointed potatoes. The rest seem to have joined some kind of passive resistance movement by simply refusing to be pulled from the earth. You try to help. You really do. But after snapping 3 in half and unearthing a worm with unsettling authority, you're reassigned to holding the basket duty. It's a dignified demotion. The monks work quickly, scanning the rows for any alternative. A patch of stubborn carrots offers hope. Wild onions are located, somewhere between a shrub and a dare. And in a small wooden crate near the kitchen entrance, someone finds exactly 3 garlic bulbs and a mystery gourd that nobody remembers planting. It smells like old melons and regret. Perfect. This is how monastery meals go when the garden has opinions. There's no shopping list. No market run. Just adaptation and quiet perseverance. Historians still argue whether these food adjustments were ritualistically framed as divine tests, or if they were just pragmatic responses to the unpredictability of highland farming. Probably both. Monks are nothing if not multi-purpose. Inside, the kitchen fills with steam and subdued urgency. A pot bubbles. Brother Solomon stirs it like he's negotiating with it. The stew, if you can call it that, is evolving by the second. Turnip trimmings, wild onion greens, mystery gourd, a handful of lentils that might be older than you, and something powdered from a jar labeled only with a cross and a question mark. You help tear and jira. Carefully. This batch is a little too thick, a little too chewy. Maybe the batter sat out too long, or maybe the fire didn't behave. Still, it'll hold. By the time the meal is served, it smells oddly comforting. Not pleasant, necessarily, but familiar. Like rainy days in dusty storage jars and the part of hunger that isn't urgent anymore. You eat. Slowly. The stew is earthy, complex, a bit sour. The gourd adds sweetness, the turnip bitterness, and the onions. Well, the onions are just showing off. Together, they don't quite blend. It's more of a conversation than a harmony, each flavor speaking up at once. But it works. Mostly. The monks eat with the same reverence as always. No one complains. No one even flinches when someone bites into a carrot that clearly lost a wrestling match with the soil. The silence holds, strong and steady. Food, no matter how strange, is still a gift. Across the room, Brother Teklu wipes a smear of stew from his chin with the precision of a man who once dined with royalty. You think he might wink. It's hard to tell. Either way, you grin, internally, of course. Outside, the rain finally comes. A soft, insistent drizzle that dapples the courtyard stones and seeps into the dirt paths. The garden will drink it greedily. Maybe tomorrow the turnips will behave. Maybe not. Either way, someone will cook something. Someone will chew in silence. And someone, probably you, will discover a new flavor that tastes suspiciously like perseverance. You return your bowl, rinse your hands, and step out into the damp air. The clouds have settled and now, thick and heavy. You pull your hood tighter and watch the droplets run off the garden leaves, washing them clean, readying them for whatever comes next. You smell it before you see it. A tangy, sharp, unmistakably goatish scent drifting down the hallway, winding through the stone corridors like a rumor. You follow your nose, past the linen room, past the shadowy alcove where Brother Dawood naps vertically like a determined bat, until you reach the dairy nook. And there it is, cheese. Well, cheese. It's crumbly. It's off-white. It's leaking something that may or may not be liquid. And it's sitting in a shallow basket lined with banana leaves, radiating an aura of confidence not entirely deserved. This is Ayab, the fresh cheese of the Ethiopian highlands, soft, unripened, and made with a stubborn refusal to involve refrigeration or predictability. Today's batch is particularly enthusiastic. A monk you've never seen before gestures toward it with both hands, as if offering a sacred relic or presenting you with a test. You lean in and take a cautious sniff. Strong, faintly nutty, also faintly barnyard. You nod. The monk nods. No one speaks. Because, of course, silence. Ayab is traditionally made by curdling milk, goat or cow, if available, with lemon juice or a souring agent, then draining it through cloth until it stops arguing. The result is soft, grainy, and surprisingly dry. It's not aged, it's not pressed, and it absolutely does not melt. But it does feed hungry monks on non-fasting days, and it pairs beautifully with injera, spicy lentils, or even just a spoon and some mild spiritual despair. You're given a portion, wrapped in leaf, warm from the day's heat, and slightly sweating. You carry it back to the dining room like it's explosive. By the time you unwrap it, it's begun to settle, its edges hardening just slightly, like a cheese that's found peace. You tear some injera and scoop up a bit. The flavor surprises you, mild, tangy, just a touch grassy. Not bad. Actually, sort of, comforting. Like yogurt that gave up on being smooth and decided to live as its truest, lumpiest self. Today's meal is a rare combination, ayab with a dollop of spicy lentil paste, injera, and, brace yourself, a smear of kaib, the sacred butter. Someone must have snuck it in for a feast day or an abbot's name day, or maybe just because it's Tuesday and we all deserve nice things. The butter is yellow, flecked with herbs, and smells like it was churned by angels who dabble in garlic. Historians still argue whether monastic cheese production was systematic or accidental. Some say cheese-making knowledge came from Egyptian monks. Others insist it was a local invention, born of necessity and too much milk during non-fasting seasons. Either way, the tradition has held. Even now, in the quiet belly of this stone monastery, cheese endures. Quirky detail, some monks insist that ayab tastes better if made during a full moon, especially if the goat was milked after midnight. Superstition? Maybe. But today's cheese does have a mysterious edge, like it knows secrets. As you eat, a small crisis unfolds 3 seats down. A particularly aggressive dollop of lentil paste slides off Brother Yared's injera and lands squarely on his tunic. He stares at it for a moment, then very deliberately scrapes it off, adds it back to his bread, and continues eating. Not a blink out of place. You respect the commitment. You clean your portion slowly. Ayab clings to the injera, resisting a little, then giving way. There's something undeniably satisfying about it, the texture, the flavor, the quiet way it settles into your stomach like a warm, slightly confused cat. You don't smile, but you do breathe just a little deeper. After the meal, you're invited, silently, with a nod and a gesture, into the tiny dairy storeroom. It smells of milk, cloth, and the eternal hope that nothing is secretly fermenting in the corner. Clay jars line the walls, most marked with carved crosses, a few with faint symbols you don't recognize. One jar, larger than the rest, is bandaged with twine and banana fiber. A monk lifts the lid. Inside, future cheese. A pale, sloshy curd that smells like commitment. You back away slowly. One miracle at a time. As the sun lowers and shadows stretch long across the courtyard, you make your way back to your corner of the sleeping quarters. Your belly is full. Your mouth still tingles from the spice. And your fingers smell faintly of goat milk and ancient linen. You fall asleep wondering what tomorrow's cheese will taste like, and whether you'll ever understand how something so simple could feel so profound. You wake in the dark. Not early morning dark. Not just before dawn dark. This is the deep, blank kind of dark that lives between midnight prayers and the first bell. You blink, unsure why you're awake. Then you smell it, smoke. Not fire smoke, not danger. Kitchen smoke. And cardamom? You sit up, listening. Somewhere beyond the sleeping mats, a door creaks open and closes softly. Sandals on stone. A cough, muffled. Then silence again. You're not imagining it. Something's happening. You slip from your cot, careful not to step on Brother Yosef, who's curled like a comma under 3 layers of coarse linen. You move silently through the corridor, down toward the kitchen passage. The air grows warmer, scented with toasted grain and something sweet. You pause at the edge of the threshold. There, lit only by one swaying oil lamp, are 3 monks. One stirs a pot. Another grinds something in a stone mortar. The third is plating what looks like a flat cake, golden and pocked with roasted barley. You watch them move in silence, efficient, practiced, and slightly mischievous. It's the midnight meal, a custom whispered about but never officially acknowledged. No one speaks of it openly. It's not on the schedule. It's not in the rules. But every few weeks, especially during long fasts or vigil nights, certain monks gather to share a quiet, secret dish between prayers. Not indulgent, not excessive, just something gentle, something to keep the body anchored while the soul keeps watch. Tonight's dish is simple: kinche, cracked wheat porridge, cooked with a hint of spiced oil and scattered with crushed roasted chickpeas. On feast nights, it might include honey or even a sliver of dried figure. Tonight, it's plain, soft, and steaming in a clay bowl. One monk sees you. He holds your gaze, then tilts his head, an invitation. You step forward slowly. No words, just the gesture. You're handed a wooden spoon, carved with rough lines and shaped like a scoop of moonlight. You dip it into the kinche. It's hot, slightly salty. The cracked grain blooms on your tongue, its texture somewhere between oatmeal and warm gravel, but in a good way. There's a whisper of spice. Coriander? Clove? It disappears before you can decide. Historians still argue whether midnight meals were part of structured liturgy or simply tolerated necessities. Some say they were a leftover from older Judaic practices. Others claim they're just what happens when you ask human beings to stay hungry and prayerful all night and expect nothing to go off script. But here, tonight, you're certain, this is no rebellion. It's a kindness. A quirky tidbit: some monks believe that food eaten between midnight prayers holds more spiritual energy, that the soul absorbs nourishment more deeply in darkness, when the mind is soft and the world is hushed. You choose slower, just in case. The atmosphere in the room is tender. Not relaxed, exactly, but kind. These monks, usually so precise, so composed, are a little softer here. Brother Abebe wipes spilled porridge from the rim of the pot and actually chuckles, a sound so rare it feels like a candle flaring. Brother Michael adds a touch more oil to the top of the kinche, swirling it with exaggerated care. No one stops him. No one frowns. You finish your small bowl. Your belly is warm. Your limbs are no longer trembling from that thin, cold sleep. You feel cared for. In a way the official meals, for all their devotion, never quite achieve. This is a different kind of nourishment. Less holy, maybe, but more human. When the bowl is cleaned and the pot cooled, one monk carries it quietly out the back door. The others return to the sleeping hall like ghosts folding back into the night. No one will mention this tomorrow. No nods. No shared glances. It'll be as though it never happened. But you'll remember. You return to your cot, wrap the blanket tight, and drift off again with a belly full of kinche and a secret in your chest. Somewhere in the monastery, the smoke thins. The oil lamp gutters. And just before sleep swallows you whole, you swear you hear the softest murmur of satisfaction, like silence, smiling. You're sweating before breakfast. Not from exertion, there's been none yet, but from the air itself, heavy with heat and the low, rising tang of spice smoke. You step out into the courtyard and it hits you full in the face. Something's roasting. Something dry, peppery, and distinctly ambitious for a monastery meal. You follow your nose past the refectory and around the back of the kitchen, where the monks are gathered, silently, of course, around a battered clay pan set over smoldering charcoal. Inside the pan, a mound of berbera spice is being toasted. Bright red-orange, it sizzles and steams as Brother Tickle stirs it with a flat wooden paddle, careful not to let it scorch. The scent is electrifying: chili, garlic, ginger, coriander, fenugreek, maybe even cinnamon if your nose isn't hallucinating. You blink away tears. It's not sad, it's just intense. Berbera isn't just a spice blend. It's the spine of Ethiopian flavor, the force behind every stew that ever slapped your taste buds awake. And here in the monastery, it's made from scratch, once a month, in a ritual that borders on religious in itself. The monks dry their own chilies, grind their own powders, and mix it in a rhythm passed down through generations. No shortcuts. No substitutions. No mercy. Today's batch is destined for a lentil stew, but not just any stew. This one marks the arrival of a salt caravan, a once or twice a year event when traders from the Danakil Depression bring slabs of raw salt carved from the earth like prehistoric currency. The monastery gets a portion, just enough to season meals for a few weeks, if they're careful. And they are always careful. You watch as a young monk grates a few flakes of the newly arrived salt into a ceramic dish. It's pinkish, rough, sharp-edged like broken pottery. You've never tasted salt so sharp. It's like licking the bones of the earth, which, coincidentally, might be exactly what you're doing. Historians still argue over the exact trade routes these salt caravans followed, and whether monks traded goods in return or simply received salt as a tithe. What's known is that salt, like spice, was precious. Not just for taste, but for preservation, for ceremony, even for medicine. A salt-slathered root was once considered a treatment for melancholy. Or possibly just a dare. Today's meal is spicy lentils with a pinch of that caravan salt and a generous dash of berbera. The stew is deep red, thick as wet clay, and simmering slowly in a pot large enough to baptize someone in. It's ladled onto the injera with reverence. You scoop your share, fingers trembling slightly, not from nerves, but anticipation. You already know it's going to hit you like a theological vision. The first bite is electric. Not overwhelming, these monks have control, but undeniably alive. The lentils are soft but structured. The spice opens slowly, like a curtain parting. Garlic steps forward. Chili follows. Ginger kicks the back of your throat like a small, holy mule. You chew slowly, respectfully. You reach for water without breaking eye contact with the bowl. Quirky tidbit, some monks believe that the spicier the stew, the more it burns away impure thoughts. You're not sure how impure your thoughts were, but you're definitely purified now. Possibly inside out. There's no talking during the meal, but glances are exchanged. Tiny, silent acknowledgments. This is good. This is rare. This is the spice we waited for. Even Brother Tickle, who rarely reacts to anything short of fire or earthquakes, raises one eyebrow after his first bite. That's basically a round of applause. You scrape your section of injera clean. Not because you're still hungry, but because you don't want to waste even a trace of that smoky, peppery joy. When the bowl is lifted and carried out, the scent lingers in the air like a memory you can taste. Outside, the air has cooled. The morning's fire has settled into gentle ash. You sit on the monastery steps, fingers still tingling, tongue still tinged with heat. The wind stirs your robes. A salt flake glints in the sunlight at your feet, dropped, forgotten, holy. You leave it where it lies. The earth gave it once. Let it return when it's ready. You're learning, slowly, that communal eating is less about food and more about choreography. And the moment that proves it comes when you reach across the mezzob for what you thought was a neutral patch of lentils and accidentally dip into someone else's quadrant. Specifically, Brother Solomon's quadrant. The look he gives you isn't angry, no, that would be too loud, but it's the monastic equivalent of a traffic ticket. One raised eyebrow. One deep, slow blink. One quiet scoot of the bowl 2 millimeters away from you. Lesson learned. Here, food is shared, yes, but with invisible boundaries. The round, woven tray sits between 5, 6, sometimes 7 monks, and everyone understands the rules. You each get a slice of the circle, like a silent pie chart of humility. You do not cross over. You do not double dip. And you absolutely do not chase down that last chunk of onion like it's a theological loophole. The stew today is thick, brown, and generously spiced. Lentils again, this time with roasted garlic and a surprising pop of something lemony. You suspect dry korima. It's a spice that looks like an overachieving black cardamom and tastes like citrus had a theological awakening. You're impressed. Quietly. As is required. You tear your injera with your right hand only. That's another rule, non-negotiable. The left is considered unclean, reserved for, well, other duties. You've adjusted, though the muscle memory took a while. That one time you reached with your left was met with a subtle but immediate clearing of throats that echoed louder than a thunderclap. Historians still debate the exact origins of Ethiopian communal dining customs. Some argue they stem from early Christian agape meals, symbolic feasts of unity and equality. Others trace them back to older tribal traditions, where sharing from a single pot was both practical and sacred. But either way, one thing's clear, the bowl is not just a bowl. It's a map of manners, a liturgy of etiquette. And your spoon, if you're using one, is a passport that must respect the borders. Speaking of spoons, today there's one at your place, carved from wood, slightly uneven, darkened with age and use. It doesn't quite match your mouth, but it feels good in your hand, worn, smooth, humble. You've seen monks carve these by candlelight, shaping each one slowly, as though every ridge and curve mattered. Some are plain. Others are etched with crosses or stylized birds. Brother Amdi has one with a lion carved into the handle. He never explains why. You don't ask. You eat, careful and rhythmic. Tear. Scoop. Chew. Breathe. Repeat. The room is silent, except for the gentle sound of hands against bread, spoons against clay, and the occasional shift of linen robes against stone benches. A symphony of restraint. A fringe belief you overheard, again, not spoken, but passed via an interpretive napkin fold, is that your state of mind when you tear the injera affects the digestion of your neighbor. It's absurd, possibly invented, but you believe it anyway, if only because you've started feeling weirdly responsible for everyone else's stomach. Halfway through the meal, the monk beside you drops a piece of bread. A clean miss. It falls to the floor, landing in a perfect fold like it's still trying to be useful. He pauses, bows his head slightly, picks it up, and tucks it into his sleeve. Not to waste it, not to eat it, just to honor it. Bread doesn't belong on the floor. Bread has purpose. You finish your portion. Your corner of the mezab is wiped clean, your spoon resting inside the curve of your bowl like a boat docked at sunset. No one rushes. No one leaves early. The meal ends not with a word, but with the lift of the tray, the shared stillness, the gentle exhale that says, "We've eaten, we've respected, we're done." Outside, the sun is high. The courtyard flickers with heat. You rinse your hands in the basin, cool water cutting through the warmth, and dry them on your tunic. You glance back at the dining room, emptying now, slowly, silently, and realize how much meaning can fit into a meal when no one says a single word, and how loud it can be when you dip into the wrong quadrant. You're not sure who carved your spoon. You found it in a wooden basket tucked behind the kitchen shelf, half covered in onion skins and smelling faintly of smoke and old stew. It's not symmetrical. The bowl end leans a little to the left, and the handle has a notch that could either be a deliberate detail or a mistake someone decided to stop fighting. Still, it fits your hand. And that's enough. These wooden spoons, used occasionally in the monastery when the meal is particularly runny, or when someone has a cold and no one trusts their fingers, are more than utensils. They're tools with stories. Each one is carved by hand, usually in the evenings, by monks too tired for scripture but not quite ready to sleep. You've seen them sit by the oil lamps, whittling slowly, heads bowed, as shavings spiral down like curled parchment. No one makes a big deal about it. No praise. No critique. Just the quiet rhythm of blade against wood, again and again, shaping something useful from scraps. Yours is made of juniper, you think. The scent gives it away. Earthy, resinous, a little sharp. It adds a ghost of flavor to whatever you scoop. Today, a loose stew of millet and roasted greens, with a swirl of berbera and a single floating chickpea that everyone pretends not to fight over. You hold the spoon like it's fragile, though it's probably not. The surface is uneven, one spot still slightly rough, as though the carver was called away mid-shaving and never returned. You imagine him pausing, slipping the half-finished spoon into a pocket, then forgetting about it until weeks later when someone else found it and said, "Close enough." There's a debate you once heard whispered by the beehives, whether monks deliberately leave imperfections in their spoons to avoid vanity. That if something is too perfect, it tempts pride. So they stop just shy of symmetry, or add a small flaw near the tip. You don't know if it's true, but you like the idea that even your spoon gets to be imperfect on purpose. Today's meal is quiet, as always. The monks sit in soft rows, the mezab shared between them. The stew is thinner than usual, so spoons are gently lifted and lowered, never scraping, never clinking. You watch Brother Kidana cradle his like a small bird. He eats slowly, reverently, always wiping the underside before dipping again. Etiquette, even in silence, is everything. Historians still argue over the origin of communal utensil use in Ethiopian monastic life. Some believe spoons were a later addition, brought in during epidemics to reduce hand contact. Others claim they were always here, used mostly by older monks or during cold seasons when warm porridge burned fingers too numb from pre-dawn prayer. Either way, they've earned their place. Quirky fact, there's a tradition in some monasteries where, if a monk drops his spoon 3 times in a week, he must carve a new one before the next fast ends. It's said to improve mindfulness, or at least hand-eye coordination. You've only dropped yours once. So far. After the meal, you rinse it carefully. No harsh scrubbing, just a soft cloth and a few drops of warm water. You set it back in your shelf, tip facing up, handle resting on a folded napkin like a relic. No one tells you to do this. It just feels right. Later that evening, you pass the carving monk, Brother Amma, sitting beneath the acacia tree, whittling in slow, methodical strokes. He doesn't look up, but he sees you. You know he sees you. A small curl of wood drifts down to the ground between his sandals. You pause. He pauses. Then, without speaking, he hands you a blank stick, juniper again, still raw, still fragrant. He doesn't explain. He doesn't need to. You sit beside him. You pick up a small knife from the tray of tools. And for the first time, you begin to carve. Your first stroke goes too deep. The second is too shallow. The third catches, peels, sings. You keep going. You've seen your share of kitchen incidents by now, spilled lentils, cracked mezobs, one particularly tragic collision with a swinging broom that launched half a pot of shiro into the rafters. But nothing, and you mean nothing, could have prepared you for the beetroot catastrophe. It starts innocently enough. You're in the kitchen early, helping to peel root vegetables under Brother Tedes's watchful, silently judgmental eye. Today's bounty includes yams, carrots, and one small pile of beets, still clinging to dirt and looking generally suspicious. Now, beets aren't standard monastery fare. They grow awkwardly in the rocky soil and stain everything they touch with a vengeance. But someone donated a sack, and waste is unthinkable here, so into the pot they go. You're assigned beet duty. The knife is dull. The roots are oddly shaped. The first cut sends a splash of vivid red across your tunic and a splatter onto the wall. You freeze. Brother Tedes raises an eyebrow so slowly it might qualify as a sunrise. You nod, solemnly acknowledging that, yes, you've now baptized the kitchen in beet juice. Still, you press on. The beets are boiled, mashed, and mixed into a modest stew with lentils and onion. The resulting dish looks like something between a celebration and a crime scene. It smells faintly sweet, earthy, and vaguely like an apology. You carry the pot carefully to the mezob. Meal begins. The monks sit, quiet, as always. The stew is ladled out. It bleeds across the injera in wide pink arcs, soaking through with dramatic flair. The table looks like a watercolor painting gone terribly wrong. You pretend it's intentional. A culinary homage to martyrdom, perhaps. You tear your injera. Scoop. Chew. Pause. It's not bad. Sweet, oddly delicate, like the beet is trying very hard to make friends. The lentils ground it a bit, and the onion adds a whisper of normalcy. But then someone bites into a slightly undercooked chunk, and the expression on Brother Lemma's face says it all. This was a mistake. The monks do not complain. That would be verbal. Instead, they chew more slowly. One monk begins to tear his injera with mathematical precision, avoiding all beet-heavy zones. Another blinks rapidly, the universal sign for "I regret being alive during this particular lunch." Historians still argue whether beets had any real place in traditional monastic cooking or were just occasional gifts from overly enthusiastic farmers. There's little documentation, but a fringe theory suggests they were sometimes used for dye, not food. You're starting to think that may have been the better option. The quirky part? Beet juice does not wash out. Not easily. After the meal, your tunic looks like it's been through something terrible. You soak it in cold water, add ash, scrub until your hands are raw, and still, it glows faintly pink, like a garment that's seen the other side. Brother Tedes walks past your line of stained laundry later that afternoon, squints at the tunic, and makes a sound that might be the monastic version of a chuckle. Or indigestion. You're not sure. The pot is scrubbed 3 times. The mezob is aired out. The floor gets a second rinse. The wall, your crime scene, retains a faint Rorschach blot of beet. Brother Johannes suggests hanging a cross over it, turning it into an unintentional icon. You suspect he's joking. Sort of. After all the chaos, a decision is made. Quietly. Without words. The remaining beets are quietly buried in the compost pit. A small ceremony, unspoken but universally understood. They tried. We tried. Let's never do this again. That night, during evening prayers, you catch a faint reddish tinge under someone's fingernails and suppress a laugh. You've all been marked. Initiated by beet. The monastery returns to normal the next day. Lentils return. Chickpeas return. The kitchen smoke smells like garlic again, not regret. But for a few days, when the light hits the stone wall just right, that pink smudge glows faintly, and everyone looks the other way. You never thought a spoonful of food could feel like a prayer until it slipped into your mouth while everyone around you sat motionless, eyes half closed, chewing in something that felt suspiciously like transcendence. It's subtle, sure, no angel choirs, no glowing light from above, but there's a hush in that moment that goes deeper than just keeping quiet. The monks aren't just eating, they're devoting. Not every dish lends itself to this kind of still, inward focus. But today's offering, a slow-cooked mix of barley, garlic, and tiny garden herbs you still can't name, settles in the bowl like a sacrament. It smells faintly sweet, faintly smoky. You scoop it gently with your now beloved spoon, and chew with the kind of attention you normally reserve for complex instructions or eavesdropping. And that's when it hits you, food as prayer isn't just metaphorical here. It's literal. In this monastery, meals aren't separate from worship. They are worship. The preparation, the silence, the communal rhythm of scooping and chewing, it's all part of the liturgy. Every lentil, every crumb of injera, every breath between bites is an offering, not just to God, but to the moment itself. There's no grace said aloud before the meal, but the entire meal is grace. Historians still argue whether this sacred approach to food was codified in monastic rule or just evolved naturally. Some claim older scriptures equated digestion with spiritual meditation, what enters the body feeds the soul. Others suggest it's simply the product of long fasting seasons and the sheer mental acrobatics required to make beans feel divine. But today, as the barley melts across your tongue, you understand it. The quirky detail? There's a specific way some monks chew, slowly, rhythmically, with eyes closed, lips barely parted. Not for digestion, but to focus attention. You try it. You feel ridiculous at first. Then something shifts. The texture takes center stage. Each grain has weight. You're no longer eating, you're noticing. Brother Gevra sits across from you, face serene. He hasn't blinked in minutes. He's either in deep meditative food prayer or temporarily asleep with excellent posture. You chew slower. You feel a kind of reverence build, not just for the meal, but for your own body. For the quiet sound of breath. For the spoon in your hand, carved slightly too thick but steady all the same. The room is utterly still. No words. No scraping bowls. No yawns, coughs, or even discreet throat clearings. Just the faint creak of old benches, and the warm whisper of porridge being lifted, chewed, swallowed. Later, after the final bite, no one rushes to leave. The bowls are gathered in silence. The mezab is lifted. A monk folds a cloth slowly over the empty space, as if tucking in a child. Another monk lights a stick of ethan, the faintly citrusy incense reserved for feast days or moments of subtle gratitude. Today isn't a feast day, but it feels like one. You sit there, back straight, not moving. Not thinking, just being. And for a few minutes, you experience what might be the rarest sensation in your modern, over-scrolling, over-caffeinated life. Enoughness. Not hunger. Not craving. Just the quiet certainty that you're here, you're full, and there's nothing else required of you. And yes, someone nearby definitely just fell asleep sitting up. But no one wakes him. That, too, is devotion. You leave the dining room slowly. The sun has shifted, brushing gold light across the flagstones. You pass the herb patch on your way back to your quarters. It smells like rosemary and thyme and something untranslatable. You pause. The breeze tugs your sleeve. You look down at your hand, still gently cradling your spoon. You whisper, just inside your own head, "Thank you." Not to anyone in particular. Just to the moment. Today is different. You can feel it in the air, brighter, sharper, threaded with something like anticipation. The courtyard has been swept twice. The bell has been polished. Even the chickens look more organized. You know what this means. Or rather, you've learned what it means. A Saint's Day feast is coming. But don't let the word feast fool you. In the monastery, a feast doesn't mean roasted lamb, towers of honey bread, or anything remotely resembling a medieval banquet. Here, it means that the stew will have a few extra chickpeas. Maybe a touch more oil. If the stars align, a sliver of dried fig might appear like an edible comet across your injera. But the most noticeable change? The silence becomes festive. That's right, festive silence. There's a lightness in the way the monks move today. No words are spoken, Of course, that would be radical, but the usual gravitas has softened. A few of them hum as they carry trays. One walks a little faster than the rule strictly permits. Brother Jonas even tosses you a sprig of mint as you pass, which you instinctively try to eat. It turns out it's for decoration. The meal is prepared with more color than usual. The injera is a little thicker, a little more pillowy, and you suspect someone added teff from a better batch, reserved for holy occasions. The stew today, lentils again, because some things never change, has a shimmer of clarified butter on top. You catch it glinting in the light like a blessing that remembered its chores. You tear a piece of injera, scoop, and chew. And it's not just food. It's a reminder that joy has a quiet version too. Historians still argue how elaborate these monastic feasts ever truly got. Some early travel diaries speak of elaborate spreads, while others describe meals so austere the only indulgence was salt arranged in the shape of a cross. The truth probably lies somewhere in between, modest ingredients, reverent presentation, and a silence that could make a symphony jealous. And today, that silence is almost melodic. A quirky ritual follows the feast. When the bowls are scraped clean and the injera reduced to the last torn edge, the monks bow their heads, not in prayer, but in what one might call digestive reflection. It's a moment set aside not to ask for more, but to acknowledge what has been received. No words. Just a stillness that says, this was enough. We notice. As part of the saint's day, there's also coffee, roasted on the spot, in a shallow pan over an open flame. You watch as the beans darken, crack, release their scent like the breath of some ancient forest. The smoke curls around the room. The monks lean in. No one drinks yet. The smell alone is enough. When cups are finally poured, thimble-sized, dark, intense, it's not a caffeine rush. It's a ceremony. Sip. Pause. Sip again. The bitterness wakes something in you that stew never could. You've heard rumors that some monks fast from coffee, but you're fairly certain that's only during periods of extreme penance or temporary lapses in good judgment. The feast ends. The dishes are carried away. The room clears slowly. But even as the bench is empty, the warmth lingers, on the table, in the air, in your chest. And the silence? It doesn't leave. It just stretches out and lies down beside you like a cat who's had its cream and now wants to nap near the window. You step outside into the courtyard. The sun is low, spilling golden light across the stones. A monk walks past, carrying what appears to be a single roasted beet on a leaf. You salute him internally for his bravery. Later that evening, you spot Brother Mabrata brushing the wall where the beetroot stain still faintly glows. He wipes once, then stops, then smiles, just a little. Feasts come and go. Saints are remembered, even if their stories blur. But what stays is this rhythm. The knowing. The shared silence. The single extra chickpea that makes you feel like the world, for one spoonful, has chosen generosity. You're in the kitchen alone when it happens. Not cooking, just lingering after dish duty, drying your hands on a cloth that feels like it was once part of a ship's sail. The fire is dying down. The last pot is turned upside down to dry. And then you hear it, a whisper. Not a voice exactly. Just the soft shuffle of feet. A breeze through the shutter. The creak of the spice rack behind you. You turn. No one. But something's different. You look around. The kitchen, normally so grounded in now, the sizzling oil, the wet slap of injera batter, the rhythmic scrape of ladles, feels haunted. Not in the spooky, cobwebs and wailing sort of way. No. This is softer. Slower. As if the air remembers something. As if the walls are watching. You take a step forward, toward the herb baskets stacked by the old wooden shelf. One of them is open. Inside, dried leaves. Fenugreek, probably. But on top of it, tucked carefully, is a slip of cloth. You lift it. Embroidered on it, faint and frayed, a name. Not anyone you know. A monk who once stood here, decades ago, stirring stew in silence. That's when you realize, this kitchen is full of ghosts. Not the kind that slam doors or rattle pans. These are monk ghosts. Quiet ones. The kind that linger in the way the salt is stored. The way the garlic is braided. The way the door never quite closes unless you lean on it just right. You feel them, generations of hands, of silent cooks, of weary disciples chopping onions and mumbling prayers under their breath when no one was listening. Historians still debate the extent to which oral tradition preserved monastic recipes. Very few were written down. Instead, meals passed from monk to monk, generation to generation, not through instruction but observation. You weren't told how much spice to use. You just stood there, night after night, and watched. Until the garlic spoke to you. You leaned closer to the spice rack. Carved faintly into the side, barely visible, are notations. Not quite a recipe. More like reminders, less fenugreek on fasting days. Brother Theodros likes his shiro thick. Use the middle gourd, not the one that leaks. Quirky detail? Some monks believe that if a recipe is lost, the spirit of the last monk to cook it will revisit the kitchen until someone rediscovers it. You don't believe in ghosts. But you do now stir stew clockwise, because that's how Brother Fikru always did it. And Brother Fikru's stew never burned. The next morning, you rise early. Earlier than usual. The kitchen is empty again. But not quite. You begin chopping onions with a rhythm that isn't entirely your own. You reach for the lentils without looking. Your hand finds the dried basil without thought. You move as though someone else is guiding you, gently, patiently, from behind. As the stew begins to simmer, you close your eyes. The scent is familiar. Exactly familiar. Like a memory you've never had. By the time the other monks arrive, the mezab is already set, the bread sliced, the pot steaming. No one asks who cooked. No one comments. But Brother Ezra nods as he chews. Just once. Deeply. You rinse your hands, wipe the knife, and tuck the embroidered cloth back into the herb basket, just where you found it. Somewhere in the ceiling beams, a draft shifts. And then all is still again. The meal tonight is quieter than usual, not because anyone has imposed stricter silence, if that were even possible, but because this one matters. It's the final meal before the long vow begins. Not a day-long fast. Not a week of abstaining from oil. This is the start of a year-long vow of silence for several monks, and as is tradition, the meal before it is both a send-off and a kind of edible anchor. No speeches are made. No farewells given. But everything tonight carries weight. The injera is flawless, soft, springy, warm, folded like parchment just off the press. The stew is thick with yellow split peas and seasoned with a confident hand. There's even a garnish, thin sliced roasted garlic, arranged in a quiet little spiral on top like edible punctuation. You scoop it carefully. The monks at your mezab do the same. Across from you sits Brother Alameu, a tall, quiet presence with deep lines etched into his face like someone carved prayers into his skin with time. He's one of those taking the vow. A year. No words. No hums, no mutters, no gestures that could be interpreted as, hey, pass the salt. Just pure, unbroken quiet. You've watched him eat dozens of meals before, but tonight is different. He chews slower. His posture is straighter. His fingers, usually steady, tremble slightly as he tears his injera. You imagine what it must feel like to know that for the next 12 months, your voice won't shape the air, not even once. And yet, there's no fear in his eyes. Just stillness. Historians still debate whether this particular vow of silence originated as a practical monastic method or a more mystical undertaking. Some claim it was a test of endurance. Others say it was believed to purify the spirit through silence, allowing divine truths to unfold like petals in the mind. One account says a monk once took the vow and never spoke again, not because he forgot how, but because, in his words, everything I wanted to say was already there in the soup. Tonight's soup is a quiet miracle. Chickpeas, cardamom, a dusting of dried rue. Comforting, complex, but not flashy. No holy visions, but maybe a little clarity. Quirky fact, in some monasteries, the final meal before a long vow is served with a symbolic ingredient, usually something from the wild, a single foraged mushroom, a berry, a sprig of forgotten mint. It's said to remind the monk of what lies beyond the walls. Tonight, you spot a dark leaf folded into Brother Alameu's stew. Basil? Maybe. Or something rarer. As you eat, the silence deepens, not heavy, but dense, full. Like everyone is listening. Not to one another, but to the meal, to the moment, to the quiet shape of farewell that doesn't need language to land. When the mezab is emptied, a soft chime rings from the far doorway. That's it. The line is drawn. The vow begins. Brother Alameu rises. He bows, not deeply, not dramatically. Just enough. Then turns and walks out, not quickly, not slowly, just completely. His sandals make the faintest whisper across the stone. You watch until he disappears around the corridor. No one claps. No one nods. But you feel it. A quiet shifting in the room, like wind through the pages of a closed book. After the meal, you help rinse the bowls. One of the younger monks hums a single note before catching himself and biting his lip. You pass him a towel, and he presses it to his face like a second silence. Later, back in your sleeping quarters, you lie on your mat, eyes tracing the wood beams above. You think about the year ahead for Brother Alamehu. The stillness. The soft, repetitive meals. The way he'll listen to the world without once interrupting it. You wonder what his first unsaid thought will be tomorrow morning. And you wonder, when the time comes, what his first word back will be. If any. The wind has shifted again, cooler now, moving through the cypress trees along the monastery's northern wall, whistling gently like a breath drawn through a reed flute. You sit by the outer garden, a bowl of simple stew in your lap, the final meal of your visit cradled in both hands. The spoon is one you carved yourself. A little wobbly. A little proud. The lentils tonight are unadorned. No surprised chickpeas. No slivers of figure. Just the old standard, softened, spiced, and gently steaming. There's something fitting about ending on something this plain. It's honest. Final meals, like final pages, don't need fireworks. You tear a piece of injera, your last for now. You dip it slowly. You chew with the sort of reverence you only learn by doing it 2-3 times a day for weeks straight. Everything has become quieter inside you, not just around you. The silence of this place has worked its way into your bones. The monks eat as they always do, gently, without a sound. Brother Michael, who once dropped a gourd full of porridge and maintained absolute eye contact while cleaning it up, sits across from you. He doesn't speak, but he taps his thumb lightly against his spoon. A signal. Not a goodbye. More like a knowing, you've made it this far. Historians still argue whether outsiders like you were ever permitted long stays in monastic communities like this one. Some records suggest rare, exceptional cases, pilgrims or scribes who proved themselves useful, respectful, quietly devout. Others think those stories are just hagiographic embellishments, metaphors for spiritual seekers. Either way, you're leaving now. There's a finality to the spoonfuls tonight. Not in a dramatic way, no grand send-off, no ceremonial bread tearing, but in the small details. The stew is a little salter. The injera slightly warmer. Or maybe that's just you, paying more attention. The quirky part? Some monks believe your last meal here shapes your dreams for the next 7 nights. That whatever flavors linger on your tongue as you sleep will guide your mind toward either peace or puzzlement. You wonder, as you swallow, if lentils can summon closure. After the meal, the bowls are cleared, hands washed, heads bowed. The mezab is wiped, and the room empties slowly. You remain for a moment, just long enough to see the last flicker of firelight vanish into the stones. Later, under the stars, you step into the courtyard one last time. A few monks shuffle past, wrapped in their robes like statues in motion. You nod. One nods back. That's it. That's the ceremony. And now you sit here, remembering every flavor, each bitter grain, every pulse of berbera, the soft surprise of shiro on fasting days, and the fleeting magic of honey wine on feast nights. You remember the silence not as absence, but as something full. Not empty space, but the space where meaning was allowed to grow. And with that, now, you lean back into your bed, the pillow cool beneath your head. The breath in your chest comes slower now, deeper. The images of the monastery begin to fade at the edges, soft light from oil lamps, the scratch of spoon on clay, the faint perfume of toasted teff and garlic rising from a morning hearth. You remember the quiet, thick and kind. The way it held you, not in sternness, but in steadiness. You remember the texture of injera under your fingertips, the give and curl of it. You remember your spoon, carved not perfectly, but patiently. Just like you. The night settles heavier now. The garden beyond the wall is still, the beet stain on the refectory wall finally faded into nothing. You breathe through the memory of spice, of roasted lentils, of that whispering belief that food can be a form of prayer. Let those thoughts drift with the wind over the stones, through the herbs, and past the resting bowls. Your limbs feel heavier now. That little flicker of warmth still lingers at your center, not from the stew, but from the stillness. The peace of having chewed in silence. The quiet joy of having been full, not just of food, but of meaning. Sleep approaches on quiet sandals. No fanfare. No noise. Just the calm, slow closing of a wooden monastery door in the dark. You are full. You are still. You are home now, in the silence. Sweet dreams.